The Bears have stolen Ben Johnson from their divisional rival, the Detroit Lions. We dig into the fantasy and implications for both teams, plus discuss other top NFL news on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL, fantasy, and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. We got big news. As soon as we recorded our show, actually yesterday, this news dropped on us. But Ben Johnson is officially the head coach of the Chicago Bears. We were a bit worried that he might go to the Raiders. Luckily, he is going to the Bears. I think this is much better for fantasy. I don't know how he'll be as a head coach in terms of, wins and losses, but this has to give us hope for Caleb Williams and the rest of this offense moving into next season.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you have to feel very optimistic. I mean, they spent a lot of money to make sure they got their man. They had some competition from everybody, basically looking for a coach. Their closest was the Raiders. They throw a reported $13 million for him to be the head coach because, look, they're desperate. They used a number one overall pick on Caleb Williams. He's got a lot of weapons. We can go through them and see how they're affected here. But you look at Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, DJ Moore, Cole Kmet, DeAndre Swift. The biggest issue they had in Chicago was 68 sacks for Caleb Williams. The offensive line was on a record pace, right? They were going to put him in David Carr territory for the most sacks ever. So I think their highest priority is going to be fixing that offensive line. Will they go after a big name in free agency? Will they really invest in that in the draft? I think this is going to be a very offensive-minded offseason for the Bears.
Yeah, and it's not even just about the offensive line, which is going to have to get fixed up because, Ben Johnson has been working with the best or second best offensive line in his time with the Lions. So definitely have to work on that. But Caleb Williams was a big fault in all those sacks he took. He just holds onto the ball too long. So hopefully Ben Johnson can fix that for him. But we've seen play callers and good, offensive systems fix quarterbacks quickly just recently, right? Like Sam Darnold goes to Minnesota, ended up falling apart at the end of the year, but he was great with Kevin O'Connell for the first 17 weeks. Baker Mayfield with, Dave Canales, and then with Liam Cohen fixed him. Geno Smith with Dave Canales. Bryce Young with, Dave Canales at the end of this year. So definitely can fix Caleb Williams quickly. We even saw Jared Goff take a huge step with Ben Johnson, and he had Sean McVay before that, but huge difference in his stats from 2021 with the Lions his first year and the next 3 years with Ben Johnson. So I'm really excited to see what he can do with Caleb Williams.
Yeah, and we'll see how the pecking order of the weapons goes, right? Keenan Allen became a key go-to guy because DJ Moore was pouting and not doing the right things. Rome Odunze was a rookie. So we'll see how they incorporate it. Does Rome Odunze challenge a little bit of Jameson Williams? You see the big play threat. He's Keenan Allen, the go-to guy. Even though he's getting a little older, he's still pretty reliable in his slot work the way that Amon-Ra St. Brown is. And then Cole Kmet, kind of forgotten man in this offense. I think they could have thrown him a lot more. We know what Ben Johnson has done with Sam Laporta, right? So you look at some of the parallels in the division, it's pretty easy. Ben Johnson's going to see the Lions twice a year. So I think there's going to be some of that at play here. How can they transfer a lot of the things they were doing well with the Lions to the Bears?
Yeah, and Keenan Allen's a free agent, so they'll have to decide if they want to re-sign him or not. For fantasy, I would prefer they didn't. It's just so much easier when there's two wide receivers that you can target instead of three, right? Like, I'd love it to be the DJ Moore, Rome Odunze show. Also, I feel like, I don't know if Keenan Allen fits in Ben Johnson's system so much. I think he'll want more speed there. I don't know. I'm kind of hoping they don't re-sign Keenan. I'd love it to be a Odunze, DJ Moore, Cole Kmet. Like, the one thing that you can get excited with Cole Kmet is hopefully more consistent touchdowns, right? When you're playing on a team that's so incredibly bad at scoring, I mean, they were a bottom 5 scoring offense this year, the last in total yards per game. it's just hard when you're not on the field much and you're not scoring touchdowns to get consistent touchdowns. Hopefully Ben Johnson can fix that for Cole Kmet. What are your feelings on DeAndre Swift, though? Because he has once played with Ben Johnson, and Ben Johnson much preferred Jamal Williams to DeAndre Swift. So what are you feeling about him going into next year?
Yeah, I think what you're going to see is where do they get the weapons inside, right? We look at Cole Kmet, that's important. Now, do they think about DJ Moore or Rome Odunze? Should Allen depart? Working one of them in the slot. I would think Odunze has that potential of St. Brown. So now you go to the backfield. Is DeAndre Swift exactly Jahmyr Gibbs? No, he's not. Is Roschon Johnson exactly David Montgomery, who came from Bears to the Lions? No. So I could see them blowing up this backfield completely. I know they signed Swift to a multi-year deal. I could see him falling into a more complimentary role, and maybe they go after someone who can touch the ball on a more regular basis. Maybe they bring in like an Aaron Jones, right, to fit in this offense a little bit. But there's no way I can see Swift and Johnson being the leads of this offense because, look, you're right. Ben Johnson saw Swift and didn't like what he saw, had to upgrade. And look, the Bears are really hurting ever since David Montgomery left. So they need that type of runner. So offensive line needs to be fixed first. But I think as much as we're talking about Caleb Williams and the passing weapons, Ben Johnson, the foundation of everything he did was based in the running game, creating the play action, protecting the quarterback that way, being less predictable. So that's going to be huge for Caleb Williams as well.
And, Ben Johnson just really prefers that backfield split. I mean, even with how good Jahmyr Gibbs is and how good we see him when he is alone and David Montgomery's hurt, they like to use the backfield split. So I'm expecting him not to give any of these guys full workloads, and they're going to have to be super, super talented like a Gibbs to overcome, splitting that work of that backfield or be scoring a ton of touchdowns like Jamal Williams did in that 2022 season playing with DeAndre Swift. Now with Jared Goff, this is really hard because we have to wait to see who they promote to the OC, right? I personally want it to be someone inside the building. I think that would be the best thing for Goff in this offense to just have that consistency. And it should be, not too crazy of a turnaround. What I am scared of, though, is Ben Johnson taking these assistant guys, right, that he's been working with and giving them a promotion. So they do leave, like Mark Brunell, who's Jared Goff's quarterback coach. Like, what if he takes him and promotes him to OC? And he's actually able to get him out of the Lions building. Then Goff loses his quarterback coach and OC. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But for right now, you do have to be worried about Goff's future in fantasy until we see who they sign here.
Yeah, I mean, there's rumors of losing their offensive line coach. Seattle will talk about that in our coaching news and rumors coming. So there could be a little bit of brain drain in this coaching staff under Dan Campbell. And that's a little bit concerning overall for the Lions. So the Lions lose some of their window. Now, I still think this team is rather young around the quarterback, so everything should be pretty good there. This offensive line is rising, and Penei Sewell has been locked up. They might have to flip sides with him if they move on from Taylor Decker. So, look, I think they'll be okay. I just don't want to buy into Goff. Like, I'm not a huge Goff fan in general with his play. I think he's very system and support dependent. That means he needs everything working around him. When it breaks down or they're playing from behind, we saw it in the game against the Commanders, he doesn't look all that good. I know in the end his numbers are okay for fantasy, but I think he may have reached his peak in fantasy. I just will say that. I think you can't just lose such a good coordinator for your quarterback success and go there unless you're able to do the Mayfield and go from Canals to Liam Cohn.
Yeah, and we saw this after the Eagles Super Bowl appearance. They lost both their OC and DC, and they struggled with losing them in the 2023 season. It was not nearly as pretty as it was in 2022. So we might be seeing that. Also, I'm a little worried about Jameson Williams and David Montgomery. I think those are the two in this offense of skill players I'm most worried about, because if there's less scoring, less time on the field, I mean, that's going to hurt the third target the most, right? And Jameson Williams even could be fourth behind Gibbs and Laporta. And then David Montgomery, because like I said, Ben Johnson loved to use that split backfield so much. What if this next guy whose play caller loves Jahmyr Gibbs more, right? And he's like, we need this guy always on the field because he's so stinking good. That could really hurt David Montgomery as well. And he's been so dependent on those touchdowns too.
Yeah, I look at that totally happening. I mean, David Montgomery Again, he's also getting a little bit older. He's the older back. He's had more wear with injuries, right? Just another stretch of missed games, so that's always a concern. Gibbs is still working in his prime, still explosive as ever, just not too far removed from coming into the league. So that's a concern. And the other thing about Jameson Williams, I will add real quick, that Ben Johnson was so good at scheming him open. I mean, getting him downfield open is one thing, but then also using him in the running game.
Yeah.
And then he decided to throw a pass with him. So he was good at using Jameson Williams' speed in different ways when the passes weren't there downfield. So that's what I'm concerned with Williams. Can he expand his role and continue that momentum with a different coach?
As long as they have this offensive line, though, and Jared Goff doesn't fall completely on his face, like this offense is going to be fine. It might not be number one in the league, but it's still going to have a lot of good fantasy weapons. I'm not worried about Gibbs. Amon-Ra St. Brown will still get his targets. It's just the deeper weapons, right? That maybe they're not as electric, such a great scoring team that maybe they drop off a little bit. All right, we're going to get into more coaching rumors. The Cowboys are really struggling, man. And what in the world are the Raiders going to do? We'll discuss right after a quick break. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by the Gametime app. Buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. I use this app all the time for a reason, and everyone across the country uses it for many reasons, because you get a panorama view of your seat before you buy. So there's never any surprises when you arrive to your event. You get to buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps, and you're set. And they have the best ticket coverage in the business in case anything goes wrong. Event cancellation protection, 24-hour return guarantees, and even job loss assurance. You get to take the worries and the guessing work out of buying tickets with Gametime. Just download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, you just create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. So, the Cowboys, the new rumors is that they're thinking about just promoting their OC, Brian Schottenheimer, to be their head coach. I will say there's a couple concerns here, right? I mean, Schottenheimer's not the most exciting play caller, right? He's also 52 and has never been, I don't know if he's been considered for head coach or he hasn't wanted to be one, but he's been an offensive coordinator in the league for so long. No one else in the whole league has thought, I want this guy as head coach in all of this time. And you're like, you know what, this should be our next guy. That seems alarming. And also the fact that they couldn't get Ben Johnson to want to work for this team because of Jerry Jones. That should be very, very alarming. This was clearly the best job available. And he went with a terrible organization with the Bears instead of wanting to go work with Jerry Jones. These are all things that are really piling up on the Cowboys and making me very worried.
Yeah, I mean, you always think Jerry Jones is going to be maverick. He's going to go against the grain. He's going to be forward thinking. He's going to do his own thing. But he hasn't really been able to do that. I mean, Mike McCarthy was a retread who had won a Super Bowl, and he kind of cleaned some things up for this team. But there were still a lot of things that Mike McCarthy's issues with the Packers kind of put into motion here. And Schottenheimer's not going to change too much. Like, I think in a way he's afraid to bring in some just unfamiliar pieces or just radically change things, Jones. So Schottenheimer might be being lobbied for by the players, Dak Prescott, and whoever else. So as much as the Cowboys, we think they're going to go after a big fish, like we've talked about Lincoln Riley in the past, even Cliff Kingsbury would be the guy that they could look at now. I don't know. Maybe it's out of the comfort zone of Jerry Jones. And again, Schottenheimer, you know what you're going to get from him. It's the let Russ cook days. It's the running heavily and then throwing downfield. So I don't think that's that much better or an improvement or something innovative for Dak Prescott.
It's not, and it's not going to get us excited because then we're just going to see the same things we've been seeing over the last couple of years, right? And it's basically like throw to CeeDee Lamb and hope for the best, and then not a lot else. So that would be very unexciting and very uninspiring by the Cowboys. Now the Jaguars rumored to be, closing in on Liam Cohen, but they also have a second interview with Robert Saleh on Friday. Those are two very different, coaching candidates, right? Liam Cohen is the OC with the Bucks right now, had a great season with them. Robert Saleh got fired from the Jets, but is defensive, minded coach. So obviously for Trevor Lawrence, you would want the Liam Cohen side, right? But how much does this move the needle for Lawrence if he does get Cohen?
Well, I think you have to think about Liam Cohen is pretty creative. The Sean McVay system extended. I mean, you can look at it different ways. You can look at it the Kevin O'Connell way at the Vikings. You can look at it with another spinoff, Zach Taylor with the Bengals. It's been pretty prolific, right? It's usually a pass heavier offense, whatever you want to call it, and really about the quarterback. And look, Trevor Lawrence has an established group of weapons here. We'll see how Christian Kirk returns healthy or Evan Ingram. And then Gabe Davis, we'll see if they won't even keep him at this rate. I mean, they might or put him in a diminished role. But you look at Brian Thomas Jr., he's a keeper. He's a player that you can build around here. I think they might have to think about a backfield shakeup if Travis Etienne Jr. is not it and Tank Bigsby is limited here. So, again, we know that Cohen unlocked a lot for the Buccaneers, like he did. I mean, the running game with Bucky Irving got going. You had late in the season Jalen McMillan. Mike Evans was Mike Evans. Cade Otton was doing more tight end. So there are some really nice offensive and fantasy possibilities should they go in that direction for Lawrence. But again, I think they're looking for a Sean McVay or Kyle Shanahan type of offense because if you go with Saleh, he's going to tap into some of that 49ers expertise for his OC.
Yeah, I would have loved Liam Cohen to get to stay with the Buccaneers for another year. I mean, poor Baker. If Cohen does leave, he's going to have the 8th different OC in his career. He's only going to be entering his 8th NFL season. So just a different OC every year for him. And then, we're excited about Jalen McMillan and Bucky Irving, but a new OC, who knows what they change or what they prefer. So it would be great if you would just stay. And I would much rather him with the Buccaneers than the Jaguars. I like the Buccaneers playmakers more, but that would be pretty huge for Brian Thomas Jr., which would be exciting. Now, it looks like Aaron Glenn is the front runner to be the Jets head coach, defensive minded. And then the Saints, maybe Mike Kafka, McCarthy. I feel like it's just going to be Mike McCarthy. That just makes sense, right? They have not wanted to rebuild for how long now? A decade? And they refuse to rebuild. So why not go with Mike McCarthy, who will exactly get them 8 to 10 wins every year and never win anything, right? That's exactly what the Saints are going to do. But who in the world is going to be the Raiders head coach is the real question.
Yeah, we might get a little bit more clarity on this going forward. I mean, they were reportedly the finalists for the services of Ben Johnson. But you do have Tom Brady has a friend still in the playoffs, a very close friend. Tom Brady's part owner of the Raiders now. He's going to have to work around his bias there with Cliff Kingsbury as he gets ready for the Eagles-Commanders game on Fox, but they're good friends. They go all the way back to their Patriots days together. Cliff Kingsbury actually was on the brink of going to the Raiders last year to be the offensive coordinator when it eventually went to Luke Getsy, and that did not work out at all for the Raiders, so maybe a redo here. Kingsbury is a type of guy. He's been out in the desert before with Arizona, high-profile guy that the Raiders could go after. He could also be promised, hey, we'll get you Cam Ward or Jalen Milroe or Shedeur Sanders, somebody you can build around. You can try to recreate this. I think Ward or Milroe would make a lot of sense given they are the dual threats. You go in that direction and say, okay, Cliff, you've got an open book here. I'm going to listen to you. Our new front office and general manager is going to listen to you, and we're going to open it up and try to duplicate what you did in Washington. Washington will do its best to keep him, however, so I don't know. I think it's going to be, I think more Kingsbury leans towards staying with the Commanders, but maybe Brady can work his magic this week when he's doing some production meetings there with Kingsbury on the field.
It would be very unfortunate for Jayden Daniels to lose his OC after 1 year.
You don't want that at all.
I do not want that. So it kind of stinks that there's just not a lot of great candidates right now for head coach. So I do think people, are going to resort to the second guys that plan B, and Cliff Kingsbury has to be in that with what he's done with Jaden Daniels in this offense this year. So that would stink, though. And then one last piece of news here. The Lions might also lose their offensive line coach, Hank Fraley, to the Seahawks. He's interviewing a second time for their OC job. Man, I mean, the Lions are just getting picked apart, right? It would just be another bad thing for the Lions this offseason. I don't know how much it changes the Seahawks outlook at all. I don't know. It's hard to go from O-line coach to OC and know like what in the world his system would be like. So that would be hard to figure out for fantasy next year.
Yeah, I think the one thing I'd it's good for is Kenneth Walker, Jackson Smith-Njigba. These young players need somebody who's going to maximize their abilities. And look, they had big years this year in their own right, but Walker couldn't stay healthy. Smith-Njigba needed a while before he's the go-to guy. So I'm just hoping for an exciting hire there, and maybe tapping into some of the Lions' success will be the answer. So we will close the show looking at some player-related news and notes, and these are things that are happening with people out of the playoffs, in the playoffs. We'll do that, and we'll do that coming up right on this last segment. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by PrizePicks. It was a pretty good week for our PrizePicks Picks of the Week. We'll have more. Now we're down to just 2 games there, so it's playoff time, and you want to make the most of the final, really, 2 weeks here. You got the conference championships and the Super Bowl. That's where PrizePicks comes in. If you love football and want a chance to win real money while watching the games, PrizePicks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. With PrizePicks, you can simply pick more or less on player stats like total passing yards or rushing touchdown, and you'll get a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds, and whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or want to cash out quickly, PrizePicks has got you covered. With more than 10 million members and millions in winnings, it is clear that people are loving playing on PrizePicks as their DFS platform. And here's a special offer to you. Make sure you tune in on Friday's show for those PrizePicks of the week. And then you can apply some of those. Just Locked On Fantasy Football listeners, download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's only PrizePicks. Check it out. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, Michelle, time to close the show with some player news and notes. We have some things going on, not a lot yet. We're not in the deep part of the offseason. So Cooper Kupp, I thought he was going to take a while to decide this, but I guess he's now planning to return. And now this piece of news does not excite me at all, Michelle. He really looked like diminished returns late in the season. So maybe he steps in a role player. This still makes me feel really good about Puka Nacua next year.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to stay with the Rams if he does play, right? Because it's $22 million dead cap in 2025. But they still need to find his replacement. I would expect them to try to bring someone in or draft someone early. I think Cooper Kupp should just be kind of forgotten about in fantasy for now. And unless you take him for a really late flyer, maybe he was just banged up this year and that was his slowdown. But definitely worrisome with him. Like, how far would he have to drop next year for even to consider him, like 10th round after that?
Yeah, I mean, it's just hard. I mean, Cooper Kupp is diminishing, and again, I think the Rams will probably draft a different slot guy that they can look at. I mean, they've had a bunch of options, and they've flown through them all on their roster here, and different guys that have been playing off Nacua when Kupp was healthy, when Kupp was not healthy. So, yeah, I think it's time to draft his replacement. Again, he's slowed down, and you can't really trust him at this point with all the wear and tear for him to even stay healthy enough to produce.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Now, Zay Flowers, not so healthy. He may need surgery on his knee after that injury. What do the Ravens do this year? Yeah. Do they go all out to try to get T. Higgins, right? Do they add that big guy for Lamar Jackson? I mean, there's not a lot of great options out there at wide receiver for free agency this year, but T. Higgins is obviously going to lead that group. Do they take another first-round wide receiver? Yeah. I mean, it's already been Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman and Marquise Brown. Like, all these guys for Lamar, they keep taking first-round guys. It's just not really working out. I mean, Flowers is fine, but it's not like he's dominant. They need more wide receiver help. I just don't know what the plan is or how they should go about it. Maybe it's just literally paying up for T. Higgins.
Yeah, just frustrating because it's just not been anything they've done schematically or the moments that they've had opportunities, it's just not executing. I mean, Mark Andrews doesn't typically fumble that way, doesn't typically drop balls that way. So how can you just ensure? There's nothing that's going to be a sure thing, right? You're not going to pick up somebody and say, okay, that guy is going to put the Ravens over the top. It just comes down to executing. But I think there is something to be said. They need more reliable guys, right? If they can't just be, okay, Andrews, you got to come through, or it's bust, right? Or Derrick Henry, you're going to have to come through, or we're going to just to try to get Justice Hill going, right? So I think they need one guy that they can kind of rely upon as a consistent deep threat. I know Rashad Bateman made a big play in that game, and I think that's what they're missing a little bit. Flowers is okay, but he's not all that home run threat. So I have them right now taking Trey Harris out of Ole Miss in the first round of my mock draft. I think that's another way they can do, but I think they just need that reliable number two to go with Flowers, and Bateman is there, but I think he's more of a role player.
Yeah, Bateman's breakout at the end of this year is promising, right? And I think he should still remain a part of this offense moving forward. But they have to bring in more weapons, especially like if Mark Andrews, who knows what's going on with him. So lots to keep an eye on here for this Ravens offense. And I'm sure they'll be adding more pieces because they're trying to get over this hump, right? They can't get over it. They can't get to the Super Bowl. Maybe they need to do what the Bills did and take away all of Josh Allen's weapons. And then maybe this is the year that it'll finally happen. With CJ Stroud, he's lobbying for the Texans to bring back Stefon Diggs. And I think that's the right thing to do, right? You have Tank Dell's injury. You don't know when he'll be back, if he'll be back at all next year. Diggs was really solid for the Texans before his injury. Second on the team in receiving yards, tied with Nico Collins for receiving touchdowns, even though he did play 3 more games than Nico during that time. But I think Stefon Diggs should be brought back and keep adding weapons for Stroud.
Yeah, he seemed to be in a real comfort zone to have that experience of Diggs to play off Nico Collins there. And I think they do have to consider this strongly. I don't think it was going to be in the cards for them before Tank Dell went down again, right? I think you look at Stefon Diggs getting older. Is he slowing down a bit? Now he's got the knee injury. There are some concerns there with Diggs. But again, you got to get Stroud to have a little bit more comfort level, not really having that second option because he didn't really trust Dalton Schultz as much, really hurt CJ Stroud down the stretch and really kind of limited the Texans offense where you knew that there was going to be a finite way of going in the playoffs and pretty much one and done. Not all that impressive in their one game here. So when you look at it, I think the Texans just look, they're just capped by what they can do right now offensively. They got to kind of revamp it here. That usually happens. Rookie year, you have some good things happen. Year 2, you learn about some deficits. Year 3, you turn around and Diggs needs to be a part of that.
He definitely does. I hope they re-sign him. It's just a good spot for him as well. Yeah. Now, one last injury to keep an eye on. Jalen Hurts, a little worry here in that last game when he went down with a knee injury, but kept playing through it. Did not run, though, like at all after the injury very much. So we got to keep a close eye on that. Apparently, the Eagles are saying they're optimistic he'll be close to 100% this weekend. But let's hope he can make it through this game with health, and we don't have to worry about any further knee injuries for the offseason next season. But please, Hurts, I cannot watch Kenny Pickett play in the NFC Championship. Please don't do this to me. Let us have a fun game between Hurts and Jaden Daniels. But we'll get into conference championship matchups later this week, tell you all the best DFS plays and our FanDuel lineup and PrizePicks. So we have a lot more to talk about when it comes to NFC championship games. On tomorrow's show, we're going to have a fun show about bad year or bust. So those players that busted this year, was it just a bad year or are they a bust? That will be fun. So we'll talk to you tomorrow. Thank you for you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Give us the subscribe on YouTube. Give us the like and subscribe on the podcast app you're listening to us on. Thank you. Bye.